that she was the founder of. So it was, I was very honored to be asked to partner with her this year and work on this exhibition and this iteration of the show, which focuses on the lived experiences of motherhood, but it has also expanded into an expanded notion of caregiving and the culture of care. So thinking about reframing, not only elevating the labor and the corporeal and spiritual experiences of motherhood and caregiving, but also thinking, elevating that and seeing the art in it, but also making it visible. A lot of this labor is usually hidden. It's usually the work of women. And in terms of opening the breadth of the show up, it was originally, you know, its former iterations was at the Pittsburgh Three Rivers Arts Festival. And Fran, you know, designed it as to be both a nursing space, a space of respite, a space of care, as well as an exhibition space. And I don't think I can overstate how radical of an idea that is. These spaces are usually very segregated, especially art galleries, which are, you know, there's certain sets of decorum and behaviors that are associated with it, and children, let alone nursing, and the idea of taking those acts of care and those performance of care into that space is something that is extremely transgressive. But I think the key to this project is to make it not transgressive. It shouldn't be radical. It should be something that is important and that is valued. And especially given this moment that we're having these Zoom, our Zoom gatherings, that care is essential to, and us coming together as a community and having care be centered, I think is critical in terms of the implications that it has for our society. So with that said, it's an amazing exhibition. I'm so excited to be part of it. I'm a mom myself. And the artists that were involved, are just really, truly amazing. And so with that, I'll let the Lioness Collective take over.
Okay, hi everybody.
Hi.
So I'm Olga Brindar, and Jessica, if you don't mind me introducing you, this is Jessica Gaynelle Moss. Also passively a part of our presentation today, Christen Russo is here on the screen with us. Go ahead, Jessica, if you wanted to say something. Okay, all right, sorry. Everything's so awkward on Zoom, you guys. So we're gonna, Jessica, do you mind screen sharing? Because I just lost everything here. We have a little presentation, a little slide to take you through as we speak. I'm going to be speaking for the first part, and then Jessica will be speaking in the second part. We have it fairly organized. Thanks to Jessica for actually creating a slide presentation. I was just going to ramble off the cuff for 45 minutes. So she's here to keep me organized. So I started the Lioness Collective earlier this year. It was before the entire world shut down. At the beginning of the year, my daughter was 13 months old. And I was thinking a lot about what it meant for my identity to have changed from that of a creative and someone who is kind of on her own in the world to someone who is now responsible for keeping this tiny little person alive. I was also dealing with a lot of pretty serious postpartum depression and trying to create and be the type A personality that I have been my entire life. And at the time, it was actually quite fortuitous because Jessica, would you have had Max by that point, or were you pregnant at the point that I was talking about the collective?
I think, I can't even remember. It's all.
I know, right? I don't know how time works anymore. But I think Jessica was either like about to have her baby or had just had her daughter. And Christen, her daughter is 4 months older than mine. So at the moment, Lorelai is 2 years and 3 months, I want to say, because Vika is going to be 2 years in December. And so I realized that I had this tiny little community of women that were roughly my age, whose children were roughly my child's age, that kind of unexpectedly cropped up. Christen, I've known for the last couple of years through a totally different job description and different part of my life that no longer exists. But fortunately, I'm lucky enough to have her continue on into this part of my life. And then Jessica and I attended Carnegie Mellon together, and we graduated the same year, and we both got BFAs. And so I knew her from that context. And these were two people one who wasn't very present in my life at the time, and one who was, I knew sort of in a passing way at the time, who both became very fast and close friends for me, just through the experience of motherhood and of us all kind of dealing with, our very own unique situations, but also, collectively, socially dealing with the same kind of issues. We were all breastfeeding moms, and we're all makers, we're all creatives. And we also have two other members of the collective, but at the time that we set up this, or we're part of this, sorry, not set up, but we're part of this exhibition, it was kind of just the three of us who decided to collaborate and be a part of it together. What was I going to say? Okay, yes. So we had, I set up an unofficial show in January of this year. And that actually happened right as I was getting the idea to put together the collective. But at the time of the show, it was very much just like, let me get all of these moms that I know who are creatives, who have young children of different ages, and have them show their work. So we had a show in Panza Gallery in Millvale in January of 2020. And creating that show really got me excited for actually putting together this proper collective. So at the moment, we're still kind of small. So it's only about 5 of us at the moment, but it's all about quality. We can go on to the next slide. Jessica put this awesome piece. We collaborated on this in 2009. That's Jessica and I at the end, on the right. Yeah. Do you remember this night, Jessica?
So this is worth noting. Olga makes incredibly large scale drawings. So you can see, just for scale, that's my body on the right side of the image. And my background is a lot of like large mural makings, but mostly like language and type. And so it was a collaborative drawing that we worked with. These were 5 women who graduated in our senior class with us, and we all 5 worked on this drawing at once. It was a lovely experience, and I think worth noting because it was one of the first times that Olga and I had ever collaborated together.
And I'm really excited that you put this in, actually, because again, I have no memory, and even though I obviously like remember this having happened, I had like filed it away in my mind somewhere that you and I had collaborated before. So when we put together the collective and my mom brain took over and you brought this slide up, I was like, yes, I remember this. So anyhow, with this, it's kind of funny, like bringing up or starting up this collective, starting anything this year. The fact that any of us have accomplished anything in 2020 is a feat in and of itself. Because of course, as soon as I was like, finally, I'm going to get my head out of the darkest places and actually do something, and be in charge of something and facilitate and bring people together, COVID shut the entire world down. And so this plan that I had to like bring these mothers together in this physical space and have us be collaborating in person and vibing off of each other's physical presence and have more shows and reach out to galleries, sort of kind of took this back seat. It all disappeared. And it was, and that's just real life. But the fact that despite all of that, all of us have been kind of in a lot of ways exceedingly creative during this year, perhaps partially out of desperation, perhaps just partially out of like wanting to see the light at the end of the tunnel. We still plan on having an official gallery show whenever things start to open up again, but being able to be part of this Anthropology of Motherhood show has been really, really wonderful. I think I speak for all three of us when I say that, because it's been this opportunity to actually be creative in this context where we can share it in a larger setting, in a collaborative setting, and a setting where other mothers, other caregivers, other people who are creative and doing this are all showing their work and talking openly about kind of the struggles of what this role means. And that was kind of a big thing for me, I think, starting this collective, because, and I don't want to ramble on too much, we'll move forward in a moment, but I was going to say that one of the things that was important to me was this idea of mourning my pre-motherhood self, like mourning that identity, that ability to just stay up all night and work on a painting and not have to worry about another human being. And I didn't want to think about it as these two competing things, because for me, being a creative is as much a part of my identity as being a mother. And so that was what led into me creating this work that I did for this show. So can we switch to the next slide?
Yeah, I just want to say a few things.
Yeah, please, go ahead.
That are worth noting. The far figure on the left is Carolyn Clayton, who is also a mother now. And this piece in 2009, there's also another collaboration that existed in this moment. Someone you might have heard of, Fran, who happens to be on this call, was also working at Carnegie Mellon during this time when Olga and I were students. And Fran was an incredibly helpful and thoughtful and supportive figure, I think, in both of our lives. Working at the print studio, but also just being a figurehead within the university. And so to be able to work with Fran as a part of the Anthropology of Motherhood exhibition is also just like this dope throwback that I don't think either one of us could have anticipated, and are really grateful to be included in this work with Fran and Amy. So I just wanted to mention those two things before we continue.
Absolutely. Very, very important things to mention. Thank you. Thanks for bringing that up. Okay, so I'm Olga Brindar. That's next slide. This is my spooky headshot that I took a couple of months ago that I'm very proud of. So like I mentioned before, this is very quick, but I received my BFA at Carnegie Mellon at the same time as Jessica, and I'm actually a Russian-American artist. I was born in St. Petersburg, and I'm actually raising my daughter bilingually, and that is also a big part of my identity as well. And even though I don't conscientiously explore that in my work at this moment in a very direct or very deliberate liminal way, it's still very much attached to who I am and the kind of work that I do. A lot of my work has a lot of mysticism in the underlayers, and that has a lot to do with my cultural upbringing. So next slide. And so this is a piece that I did for the inaugural show in January. So I called this The Holy Ones, and that's why I brought up my cultural heritage, because my roots are Orthodox Christianity and Eastern Orthodoxy, and I was raised with a very strong culture of traditional iconography. That was something that my father and my grandfather were both restoration artists, and so they restored a lot of religious relics in conjunction with the other paintings and murals and things like that they had worked on. And this painting is about exploring, so it's my mother, myself, and my daughter when she was less than a year old. I don't even remember how old she is in this image, but just the idea of repurposing in my mind and in the collective mind, the idea that motherhood isn't like, you know, you hear people say all the time, like, oh, I'm just a mom, like I don't have a job. That's like probably the hardest thing I've ever done in my life, and I'm probably not alone in saying that, is being a mother. And I'm only 2 years in, like that's it. I have like this whole giant road ahead of me, and it's still been like the most complex and complicated and important and rewarding thing that I've done. done. That said, my making work and being a creative has always been at the forefront of shaping my identity as well. So this piece is thinking about motherhood as a divine thing, as like this beautiful spiritual calling, as this thing that not just anybody can do, or and whether that means you give birth to your child or whether you adopt your child, those things being equally valid. Just thinking about that as women and as mothers, like how we should be, the role, the way that we should be viewed as more in like this reverent light, rather as in than this light of, you know, here we are being chauffeurs and cooks and diaper changers and floor washers and things like that. So that was what this piece was about. And I have to apologize for kind of stumbling over talking about my own work. When I make work, if it's still like within a year of me making it, it's very, very hard for me to verbalize what it's about, what my thinking was. It's a very intuitive process, and it's only like 3 years later that I can write or speak about it in a cohesive way. So I hope that I'm making sense as I talk about this. So next slide is another piece of work that I did. This piece I can very easily say now, but could not at the time, that this is very much about postpartum depression and about like my intense anxiety and just my absolute lowest low periods as I was mothering in my first year. And Jessica and I have both kind of spoken about this very candidly with each other, that as much as we love our daughters, it's not a situation of like A but B, it's A and B. It's we love our daughters, we love being mothers. And that first year was so hard and so just very, very difficult and terrifying and not fun for so many reasons. And just like being able to talk about that feels like such a taboo all the time, to say like, wow, my, you know, and not in front of our children, of course, but saying something like, my toddler was kind of an asshole today, is like something that people immediately are like, oh, but you're supposed to find this rewarding and perfect and brilliant. And it wasn't. Like, there were so many times that I wanted to throw myself out of a window or just had suicidal ideation. All of those things were happening very, very actively in my first year as a mother. And I love my daughter more than myself. So those two things are not mutually exclusive. So there's that next, you know, that pattern of things running parallel to each other, even though they are in essence kind of contradictory on the surface. But this piece is about that. And so this is just charcoal and paper. This is actually one of my smaller pieces. I think it's only about 2.5 feet tall, so it's not very big. Okay, next slide, please. And so the piece that I worked on for the Anthropology of Motherhood, hopefully you have all seen it, but there is a slide in here of it. It's a piece that was a direct collaboration with my daughter, and then it became a further layer of collaboration with Christen Russo, who is our resident poet in the Lioness Collective, and she writes a lot of work she writes a lot of poems talking about all the things that we're talking about, just intergenerational things, motherhood, the difficulty of pregnancy, the exhaustion, the beauty, the rewarding aspects of it, the unrewarding aspects of it. And she has a very, very beautiful, gentle, intuitive voice. I've been a fan of her poetry from the very beginning, and actually for our inaugural show in January, I asked her to pair her poetry with artists' work in the gallery. So she would walk around, and some of the darker pieces she paired with her darker poems about, you know, depression and the difficulties of pregnancy and motherhood. And then her lighter poems she posted with the more joyful and playful artist work. So there has from the beginning been this really intuitive collaboration of text and image in the collective, and I hope to continue to do that. And at least like as far as the way that Christen and I worked in this capacity, we actually had her, we came up with the idea to have her overlay this painting over top of my two paintings that I did with my daughter within the gallery. So, but I just wanted to quickly talk about, I'll try to quickly talk about my piece, my two paintings. This is called Master Copy. And so, basically, so a master copy, if Jessica, you can go to the next slide, please. So quite simply, it's a copy of a drawing or a painting done by an expert artist. It's meant as a study. It's a way for an artist in training to learn better ways of creating a composition or a particular stroke or any number of things that famous dud artists got right before you set out to try to make a mark on the world. So this is the very first paragraph of this prose piece that I wrote immediately after doing these two paintings with my daughter. So I didn't want to include the entire thing because I don't want to read at you for 15 minutes, but there are some little excerpts. Before I go into the excerpts, I just kind of want to talk about what the process was. So I had 2 3-foot by 4-foot, I want to say, canvases or thereabouts, horizontal canvases that I laid on the floor of my studio space. And I brought out some acrylic paint that I had just diluted with water a little bit to make it easier to work with in like a kind of a dipping and spreading and brush stroking. And after my daughter woke up from her nap, I told her, I said, hey, do you want to go paint? And as we came up the stairs to my attic studio, it's kind of hysterical because she's going up the stairs and she's shouting orange and then blue. And so if we go to the next slide, so she basically started painting after she decided her own colors. So she told me, she looked at me and she said orange. And so I gave her a fanned out assortment of brushes. She picked a brush. I brought the paint over that she had asked for, and she began to make strokes on the page. So here in this, I write in the present tense so that there's like this immediacy to it for this particular piece, but it's Vika places her brush in the bottom right quadrant of the canvas, begins making big, bold strokes, at once carefully considered and intuitive. I mimic her motions with my brush, my eyes flicking back and forth between our canvases, and am vexed when I realize my brush had more red paint in it, making a darker orange red on my canvas, where her orange is vibrant like the petals of a sunflower. I try not to get caught up in the disappointment and focus instead on her pace, her image emerging. So I'm basically physically mimicking every single thing that she's doing. So she puts her brush down, she swirls it, she turns it, she flips it. I'm trying to do the same exact thing and keeping up with her. And the whole time that she's doing this, like, she has the most relaxed yet serious look on her face. She's so confident the entire time. And it's so just funny to me that I'm the nervous and unsure one in this situation. So here, when I talk about how my color is more red than yellow, it's because I mixed red and yellow to make orange for her. And then I quickly mixed myself more. And as I'm following, I already feel like I'm getting behind. And so I'm already, with my empirical knowledge, with my years and years of training, with my, Malcolm Gladwell 10,000 hours of experience in art making, I am the nervous, unsure one. I'm trying to be very cerebral about it, and she just knows exactly what she's doing. So if we go to the next slide. And somebody just asked me if I took video of the painting. I did not, because my daughter is already a ham, and every time that I pull out like my phone, she immediately wants to see herself in the screen. So I didn't want to distract from the process. So this was my method of documenting it, was creating this prose piece. And I was going to say that at the end, if people do want to read the whole piece, I'm very happy to send it out. But so here's the part here, the next segment. Pardon me. Big round yellow shapes begin to fill the corner of her canvas, and subsequently mine. Baby dog, she says, creating a small round shape with 2 upward flicks. The ears, probably. She glides to the top of the shape, makes a larger one, nearly identical. Papa dog. She returns to the bottom of the canvas, right at the edge of the stretcher bar, makes a few small strokes, quiet again. What's that, I say, as I hurry to keep up with her movements. Papa, she says, her chubby cheeks spreading as she smiles wide. And that? I copy her strokes as she creates a circle just above Papa, one that extends with a long flourish and flicks up at the end. Mama, she says, matter of fact. And so the next She begins to draw tighter shapes. Most of them start as looping spirals, then are gradually filled in with 1 or 2 fat strokes of the brush. I struggle to keep up as she gains in speed. I feel the remembered panic and frustration of algebra class, of understanding the first step in the equation, and then quickly losing the plot, my carefully articulated numbers dissolving into uncertain solutions, and gradually followed by ellipses and question marks as I realize I'm falling farther behind. This too, I push to the back of my mind, try to place all of my attention on learning the strokes she is doing so easily, effortlessly. Her face looks placid, focused, her hand holds the brush with no uncertainty, not a tremble in a single finger. Did she study this ahead of time? Was she painting abstract forms on the inside of my womb with her fingertips, studying sacred geometry while she slept? How in the hell is she so far ahead already? I feel as though I've been hustled. So yeah, it's just like, it was such a fascinating process to me to try to learn from her, because I think part of the process of doing this was reminding myself that just because I have, the experience of years does not mean that I can't learn from this little unblemished person who is just pure and untainted by by these like bad habits and these doubts and these anxieties. Whenever I work, I feel like I work at such a breakneck speed because I'm constantly trying to outrun the negative critical voices in my head that are saying, well, why are you doing this? Well, what's the point? Are you making that stroke correctly? What does this painting mean? Who's going to care about looking at this? You're not going to be able to sell this. It's too big, or it's not marketable. Like all of those thoughts that go through my head about halfway through me working on something. Those things don't exist for her at all. And I loved seeing like how sure she was of herself, and the only person she's ever seen drawing or painting in her life is me. So there's this back and forth, this interplay of her learning from watching me, but not seeing all those terrible things that go on in my head about 50% of the time that I'm working. But this part I really liked the process of experiencing. She says, black, it is a declaration more than a command. Vika is returning to her graphic roots, her love of my expensive black Copic pens whose strokes recall Chinese calligraphy, Robert Motherwell, the elegant austerity of inked cursive on a white page. I dutifully squeeze Mars black out on a ceramic dish and hold out a long, skinny brush. She smiles gleefully, takes it from me, begins to write a secret language on the white spots on the canvas. This is not hyperbole. It looks like a blend of Chinese and Armenian, and I'm not sure if I'm imagining things or signaling aliens or writing terrible swear words as I rush to copy her. Again, I find myself feeling woefully remedial. I think of every time someone has tried to teach me how to salsa or to foxtrot, usually when I was 1 drink in, which is not enough for me to physically loosen up and go with the flow, but just enough to slow my capacity for memorizing anything in the short term. And then at the funniest part is that she asks for red last, and she says, red, she says, excited. I nod, pressing the last of a drying tube of cadmium red onto my palette. She sticks a dry round brush into it, makes a single well-considered mark just inches away from a black mark high on the right side, then abruptly hands the brush back to me. Take off, she pulls at her work apron, finished. And that's the process. And she was finished with her painting, and I quickly hurried up and made the last little red stroke that she added. And at the very end of the piece, I do write about this. I turn to see where she is, and she's over across the room. She's completely done with the painting. She's not giving it a second thought or doubting her process or anything like that. And I look over and she's just standing. I have this little child's easel in my studio just for her so she can paint while I'm up here working. Or draw, and she's holding 2 of her little toys, and she's just like making them kiss each other and smiling. And that's the whole process. And it just brings me back into this moment where I realize that she's just this little tiny girl. She's a little toddler. And so this whole process for me was just a way to, I don't know, I don't find myself particularly egotistical about my work, but it was also just humbling to remember what it felt like to just work and not think, even while I'm fighting my little inner mental battles the whole time I'm working. But this is something where I hope, like, as she grows older and as she develops, I don't go too much into my didactic nature. Of course, I'm going to teach her about things like color theory and perspective when she's old enough, but I hope that I still get this opportunity to continue to learn from her and what she's making and what she's creating. And then the next slide, I can't remember. Okay, so yeah, so this is the final work. I do want to talk about Christen's poem because it's really, really gorgeous. I almost wonder, and I don't want to ask too much of Christen. The reason that Christen is not actively a part of this discussion, even though she's here in the audience, is in the spirit of Anthropology of Motherhood, in the spirit of what Lioness Collective is. Christen came to us a few weeks back and said, listen, I am trying not to load my plate up too much. She's at the end of her first trimester of her second pregnancy. And she said, in the interest of self-care and not overextending myself and honoring the process of what my body is doing for me, I can't commit to being a part of this presentation and this talk. And of course, you know, in the spirit of everything that we're doing for each other as a group, we didn't give it a second thought and we're like, absolutely 100% take care of yourself. So I don't want to put her on the spot and ask her to read this poem or anything like that, but it is a really beautiful poem that I would also be very happy, I'm sure, hopefully Christen wouldn't mind, to send out as well so you guys can see. But it's a really, really beautiful poem about like kind of the generations. It talks about grandmothers and mothers and fathers and children and learning from each other and the joy of that kind of dance. And so it made a lot of sense for us to have it displayed on the wall. And it actually, if you can see in the slide, it actually goes over top of my canvas and kind of wraps around it and is all of there. So yeah, so that's, I think that's me. I could probably talk for another like 4 hours, but I'm not going to do that.
Which of the pieces is yours and which one is Vika's?
Okay, yeah, absolutely. So this bottom piece at Vika's height is the bottom piece, is hers, and then the top piece is mine, as you can see with my more red orange and my totally confused black marks. If you actually like look at those two paintings, you can see which one is done with more confidence. It's very, very clear there. Oh, and Christen says that she would be happy to read it, so I would love to give her the space and the room right now to read the poem that's on the wall. Thank you, Christen. I just didn't want to put you on the spot.
Hi, thank you, Olga. I had texted her at the very beginning of this saying that I wanted to, yes, like Olga said, I wanted to listen to that voice inside of me that was telling me to just go within and protect and stay out of the spotlight. But I am a chatty, outgoing person too. So the moment I heard Olga start talking, I'm like, oh, I wish I were talking right now too and being a part of this conversation. But Olga, all that you shared was beautiful, and I want to say publicly that it's such an honor to have my work shown alongside and on top and in the crags of your work. You can kind of see from this image that we've made the decision together to have some of the words that are overlapping Olga's painting also be on the side. So it's like we didn't, you would have to be in the space looking from the side to catch every single letter, but we trusted people would get the idea. So what it said, my poem is called My People, and that is a direct kind of hat tip to a friend of my family's. It's so funny to think when you're a kid, you think of family friends, it's like your parents' friends who are around a lot. Now my husband and I are the parents, and my daughter is around for it. So it's a friend of ours, and his name is Khalil, and he's from Morocco. He lived with us for a few months rather, and it was a really just quick rabbit hole. It was a really beautiful merging of cultures in our home, and he told me at the beginning of his time here that he really felt welcome in our home and felt very comfortable here, and he hoped that he could live here until, I don't know, maybe I got pregnant or something. And I was really offended by that because I thought it was anti-feminist and didn't feel fair. And then alas, I got pregnant, and that's what made him have to leave. So I ended up actually kind of finding joy in the outcome, and that he sort of anticipated that, and finding it to be a wonderful occurrence and a wonderful reason to have to kick out your housemate. So the title, My People, which is what Khalil calls my family, is the title of this poem, and here are the words. Yes. I find comfort in knowing. In my lineage, mamas and papas scrunched their noses, shook their legs after sitting down too long, roared out happiness, squeezed my grandmothers so tight they protested the love. Yes, yes, the same grandmothers who enveloped my mothers, who folded themselves around my selves, who reached their fingers down as I do, so you could grab on and perform my steps, your feet floating in dance. Thanks. I'll let you take back over, Olga.
Thank you, Christen. Thank you. Everybody's clapping. I'll just speak for everyone. They all loved it because it's a gorgeous. I just love this poem so much. Like I said before, I'm such a big fan of Christen's poetry as well. Just like everything of hers that I've read, I just find so gorgeous. And I occasionally say to her, like, I wrote a new poem. I want to send it to you. And then like a week passes and I'm like, I don't want to send it to you. This is intimidating. Even though she's been nothing but beautiful and supportive. So I think that
before you leave, can I ask you a question? I noticed that on some place the text also comes onto the floor. Can you talk about that choice?
Yeah, Christen, can you actually speak to that?
Sure, yeah. Similar to Olga's decision to make Vika's painting be Vika height, I wanted, well, first to backtrack, Olga is a beautiful poet herself, and she has been pushing me to be more visual with my work. So in our initial gallery display that we did as, fellow mothers before the Lioness Collective was officially formed, my poems, I think it was 5 or 6 that we showed, and they were framed on, I got real radical, like 11 by 14 paper, and just really simply framed. And it felt really good and vulnerable to have my work out there, but we thought, let's make it as, more artful and more of an experience. And so again, some artists, Jessica being one of them, may see just, black text on a white wall. It's not very radical, but this was a big decision for me and a big development in the kind of art and display aspect of my poetry. And so, so the parts that are on the floor mirror the contents and the words of the poem, talking about my steps and your feet floating in dance. And we wanted to invite those who could actually make it into the gallery space, if and when that time comes, to walk on the words and to invite themselves to be a part of this poem and a part of this collaborative piece, to really place themselves inside of the experience. Thanks, Jessica.
No, thank you, Christen. Thank you for sharing that. Olga, that was a beautiful presentation. Thank you so much for taking the time to share about your practice and your process. It's really an honor working with you and Christen, and I'm grateful for your formation of the Lioness Collective. I think it is, we're going to spend some time talking about what radical means. And as Amy mentioned at the beginning of the show, that these choices that we make are considered radical, but they shouldn't be. And so having a group of all mothers to be able to come together of different disciplines, and aside from even the art making, just kick it, and have time to be in conversation with each other, eat with each other, is something really beautiful. So I'm grateful for your work in establishing this collective. I'm Jessica. I, as Olga mentioned, graduated from Carnegie Mellon with the BFA. My focus was painting, drawing, and printmaking, which is how Fran and I got so close. I spent more time in the print media studio than probably anywhere else on campus. And I think one of the things that's so great about Carnegie Mellon is the resources that were offered for students. And one of them for me was really the Print Center and Fran specifically. So Fran, I just want to continue to uplift you and your work and the influence that you've had on me as an artist since, I don't know, what is it, like 10 years now? That's crazy. After I left CMU, I went to the School of the Art Institute of Chicago, and I got a master's in arts administration, policy, and management there. And then most recently, I just graduated from the University of Pittsburgh from the School of Law in 2018. This past year, I'm really excited. Lauren Beecham is here, and she's actually a member of Sybil Shrine. Sybil Shrine is a project that was started by Alicia Wormsley. Alicia is a force in Pittsburgh and in the world. She's a multi-interdisciplinary artist whose practice extends well beyond dimensions in time and space. Alicia and I became connected because when I was a student at Carnegie Mellon, my mentor, Ayanna Moore, who is actually cousins with Alicia, when I came back to finish law school, Ayanna was like, oh, do you know Alicia? She's in Pittsburgh. You should meet each other. And, you know, fam be Lincoln fam like that. So I made a meeting with Alicia and we hit it off and we had a coffee and it was real chat, you know, real chill and casual. And we just, you know, it felt like we'd known each other for years. And we were talking about everything from our creative practices to like our dream projects. And, you know, we ended the coffee meeting just saying that we would keep in contact with each other about things that were going on. I think our next meeting was like, you know, months later. And I showed up for the meeting and I was 8 months pregnant. And I don't think I told her that I was pregnant beforehand. So it was a surprise to her. And I remember her saying, like, I rolled up, you know, to the meeting spot and I was like waddling because I was so close. And she was like, whoa. And I was like, yeah, I know. She's like, I got a project I want to talk to you about. And this was the early formation of what is now Sybil Shrine. I have a background in working in residencies. I have a residency program in Charlotte, North Carolina that's called The Roll Up. It is artist housing. It's a duplex with a 2-car garage, and whenever the garage door is rolled up, it's a symbol for the community to come and participate in whatever the artist who's housed in the space is doing. It could be any type of programming, it could be engagement in their practice, it could just be a kick it. And the Roll Up now is in its 3rd year. We have 2 residents who are in the space right now. They're both literary artists. And as an artist, when I was designing this residency, my goal was, you know, if I had my druthers and I could make a dream residency, what would it be like? And it's like, well, I want to be paid, right? So we offer artists $15,000 to $30,000 while they're in residency. The residency is 6 months so that you can actually do a deep dive into your program and your focus. We give them transportation while they're there. They get a food and meal stipend. They get a supply and material budget. And my work as the director of the program is to make connections for the artists while they're in the city with existing arts organizations and nonprofits that align with their work. Also, with the Roll Up, there's no ask of the artists. You know, you don't have to develop a body of work. You don't have to leave with a plan. Really, it's more of a sabbatical than anything else. So come and chill in the space. There's a huge art collection. There's a big library there. It's really like everything that you would want to live in a house for 6 months there for you at your disposal. And so I had this practice in Charlotte that Alicia was aware of. And so when we really linked to talk about what Sybil Shrine could be in the early stages of forming this thing, it made a lot of sense because I had this residency building practice. And the Sybil Shrine is really modeled similarly to the Roll Up in Charlotte. But then, as Olga pointed to earlier, you know, COVID happened. And this dramatically changed the way that we were thinking about creating a residency space. For example, you know, inviting an artist from outside of the city to come live in somebody else's house is always, it's like, yo, but there's a pandemic, this could be kind of weird, you know, I don't know if it's safe. Like all of the liability issues, the barriers, the scary things, right? Like all the risks. So Alicia's brilliant. And her plan was to think about ways that we could still support artists who are mothers during a COVID time. And so, you know, everybody does this thing, right? Like we meet on the computer and we talk to ourselves in rooms and hope that other people are listening to us. And we turn to Zoom. And so Sybil Shrine Artist Residency for Black mom artists had 2 cohorts of 30 moms who would meet every Sunday at 1 o'clock. And the same as I was alluding to with Olga and the Lioness Collective, sometimes we have workshops that are about starting a business and making a budget. Other weeks we would have discussions about how to start your own garden. Other times we would just talk. Sometimes we would just cry. There was numerology lectures. Like this was just the whole gamut, and moms were paid to not only lead workshops during the time, but they were also compensated for just being a part of it, you know? So yeah, I did shout out Lauren earlier, but I just want to uplift her to, you know, Lauren does amazing work at the Bella Carnegie Library. And so to be able to be introduced to her and her work, and create a network with other Black moms who are working creatively is just so important. And so I really appreciate having the opportunity to collaborate with Alicia Wormsley and the Office of Public Art to be able to make this program happen. So I had Max, that's my daughter. Wow, that was like not planned, but timely. Hey baby, Max turned a year in November 8th, so she just turned a year old. And you know, I make drawings and I do art, and I feel like I want my baby to, if she wants to, have that as an option for her too. I think I picked up a pencil real early, I don't know, but I offered her pencils and materials to try to articulate herself in a 2-dimensional way, and she rejects them, but she loves this thing. I don't know what it is, but she loves this. Babies like this thing, right? You guys, babies probably like this. So I started, when I would change her on the changing pad, just hold my phone above her and let the, you know, there's that markup function. And I let the markup function just remain on the screen, and I would make certain choices. You know, I would choose like the background, for example, or I would start with a color that she could play with. And we made like hundreds of these kinds of drawings. And they're so fun as like an archive of her age at the time. You know, this was in November 23rd. She was like weeks old, you know, because she was born on the 8th. So this is one of the early ones, and I think it's just such an interesting way to document her process. I hope to show them later to her when she can actually understand what it is she was doing. But yeah, I have hundreds of these digital drawings that Max was making at the time. I was thinking a lot about how, you know, this is her work. Maybe it's a collaboration, but it's really hers. And I was thinking about how it could become more of a, we just taught her vowels, so that's her A-E-I-O-U. I was thinking about how it could become more of an even more of a collaborative process. And yeah, as Olga said earlier, you know, I was spending a lot of time in that chair in her room nursing for those first few months, and it was such a I don't know, I haven't sat still in a long time, you know. I just it forced me to really like sit and chill. This is Max, she's the star of the show. And so because I found myself sitting there for so long, I started this like sewing practice, which is not something that I've ever done before. I just, I felt like Dave was got holes in his socks or something, so I would sew them, or like I was nesting, so I sewed the curtains in her room. So I was just, I don't know, I was doing this thing that just came really organically. And that's when this work came to be. This is how do I call them? A soft sculpture that I made. It's 3-dimensional based on that drawing that I just showed you that Max made. And so this is the piece that was included in our first pre-Lioness Collective exhibition. And I have a little video of it because, I hung it real low so babes could play with it. And a huge part of the practice is making this work accessible, and like taking up space. Taking up space as like a Black woman, but also as an artist. And so I thought about how this could be larger than life and how it could be accessible to little people. It was like made by a little person. So I feel like little people should be able to play with it. And I love this video because, I love this video because the babies in the gallery, it was their parents who were like, can you hold her for a second? It was their parents who were like, no, don't touch it. Like it's art, like you should respect it. And this is the moment for kids to like, explore and learn and touch and feel and like be curious. And so I really wanted to try to find, every time I click the play, I really wanted to try to find ways to make it more accessible to them. This was my audience in making this piece. And so then I stopped sitting in that chair as much because she got older and now she runs around everywhere. And so my sewing practice, my practice just in general evolved. I found myself not being able to use my hands as much as I was before, like having a moment to have a free set of hands was just like few and far between. And so that practice started really to change. And I'm grateful for Amy and Fran's inclusion and support in this exhibition because although my plans for what I chose to show in the show changed, they still supported that shift. And a lot of this, I can't predict that, like Max is my first and only child, so I didn't know that I was going to be able to use my hands for 6 months, but that is what was reflected in the practice. And so I honored that. And I really started to think then about how there was becoming less and less time for me to rest. That chair that I was talking about before that I spent so much time sitting in just became like dusty, because I was like up and running and doing so many things, chasing this new little baby with like her newfound skills. But there was one day in particular, like I was just sitting down and I heard myself say something to Max, and it like hit. It was like, wow, I didn't even say that for her. It was like the ancestors were speaking through me to her, to me, like I heard myself say these things, like get your balance, like slow down, take your time. It's okay to cry, just get back up. And I was like, wow, I'm saying this for me, it's like for her, for sure. Like slow down, I know we've all said that to our kids before, slow down. But I said it and I was like, yo, I need to slow down. I need to listen to myself right now. This is crazy. And so in this exhibition, the Anthropology for Motherhood, I made this piece. And this is one of the chairs that was in her room, in her nursery. And it's my grandmother's sewing chair, which is also interesting because I was doing so much of that sewing practice. And I set it up in the corner of the exhibition because I also think too, like when she's too young for us to really discipline her. I don't know, you might have, different strokes for different folks, but I feel Like she won't even listen to it if I tell her to. I'd be like, stop. She's like, you know, so it's hard for me to discipline her. But anyway, I think about how my mom used to discipline me, and it was always go in the corner. It was like, go sit in the corner, you know, and what a privilege it would be if I did something bad and somebody let me sit in a corner for like an extended period of time and just like reflect on my thoughts, you know? And so this gallery right above the cutoff where it says get your balance is a huge window. It's like really big window. And so it was a decision to set the chair in the corner, but also like just the way that the gallery is set up with that big window just creates so much opportunity for reflection and meditation. And so I'm grateful to show this piece. As Olga said, I hope that at some point maybe y'all could go there and see it in person and sit in the chair and have a moment of reflection to yourself. And if not here, maybe you just set a chair up in your own house in the corner so you can take a break. Olga, do you have a question for me?
Thank you for unmuting me. I was like in the middle of trying to figure that out right now. No, and I feel like more than anything, I have a comment for you. It's just you talking about sitting still with your own thoughts just reminded me of a time that I asked Christen to sit for a portrait class for me because the model fell through at the last minute. And this was like 6 months ago, you know, everybody was masked and all that. And I kept checking in with her because I was worried about my models. And I was like, are you okay? Are you comfortable? And she said, this is the first time I've been able to sit alone with my thoughts for 3 hours straight, let alone 20 minutes straight. She's like, I would do this for you anytime. So I love this piece so much for that reason. How, I guess my big question for you is, how has, oh shoot, I'm sorry. I had it verbalized in my head and now it's falling apart. How has being—
Slow down, Olga. Take your time.
I know. Just get back up. Hang on. How has you becoming a mother allowed you to be more forgiving of yourself, or has it?
I think that I was thinking, somebody asked me this the other day, and I think I maybe not even mother. Yeah. Do you consider motherhood when you're pregnant too? I do. I think that becoming a mother had taught me to take like a newfound respect for my body. You know, I used to like work so hard that I would go like a full day without eating and then be like 6 o'clock and be like, oh shit, I haven't eaten all day. You know, like, wow, that's crazy. But like just be doing stuff and not really thinking about or respecting my body. And when it became not just my body, you know, and it was more about incubating and creating a space to birth another human being, it's like so not about you anymore, you know, it just like became such a bigger priority. And so I didn't skip any meals. I think I actually gained 52 pounds when I was pregnant. You know, like I didn't skip any meals. And I drank a lot of water. You know, I did a lot of things that just like are things you should do, but I wasn't doing because I didn't have the respect for the beautiful thing that creates other human beings. You know, he just wants to be in it. That's why he's here. Can you see that I'm doing something? I'm following the safety. Just kidding. Okay, so Amy and Fran, that was a perfect segue. Well, thank you. I think have some questions for us. So I'm going to turn it over
to. Wow, that was incredible, you guys. Hey. I am so proud of both of you right now, of what you know, since school and accomplishing what you've accomplished and moving on and taking your practice this way. I am so proud of both of you now. I was proud of you then, and I'm proud of you, even more proud of you now. I'm so happy with the way you guys handled your lives and motherhood and all of this. It's just, it just makes me feel good to see this. You know, sometimes you don't ever hear from students again, and sometimes you see them and you go, oh, I must have done something right. But my question, right, we talked, Jessica, you talked about this collaboration or something that we, I guess, me by being there, we collaborated on certain things. But so my position at CMU at that time, I had gotten that job in 2004. I started in 2004. So when you guys were freshmen, I was already there. But when when they called me and I got that job, it was, I think maybe it was like 6 or 8 weeks after I found out I was pregnant with my third child. Yes. So it was a different experience for me, like going in. Yeah. So Lucas was born in 04, and I started in January 04. And so my first year at CMU, I was pregnant. And then in November, I had Lucas. And so the second year at CMU was all about nursing. I nursed for 18 months. And so I would go into work and I'd close the door and I'd have this big, I don't know if you guys saw that, but I'd have this big poster of this alien woman with like 8 boobs nursing. And I would put that warning up in front of my office and say, if you want to see this, then come on in. If not, then stay away. I'm just wondering, and so that's really that moment where, you know, because I was a stay-at-home mom when I had my 2 other kids, so I never really had to try to manage it. But after having Lucas, well, having a job, it was a whole new experience for me, and I really had to try to manage. But one of the things that I wanted to live the sort of that lived experience of working in academia, right? I wanted to make sure that people understood that my priorities of my children, you know, that my families, and I carried on, and I always talked about my kids. I always brought the kids into the office. You probably didn't see that. 09, by that time, Lucas was 5, probably not. But when they were younger, you know, I would have Sean as a toddler playing with the computers and all that. Yes, and so there's just a comment that came in from Jane McCafferty that says, "Me too," but it was frowned upon. And yes, it was not quite frowned upon, but definitely not accepted, or preferred not to. Like they preferred not for you to have your kids around. But I was that was one of the things that I was adamant about this job is, you know, I had a job. I had to build a lab, and for me, in order for me to do that, I had to have my children there present with me. I did not want to sacrifice my time with my family for my job. And so that's kind of where I was going. So that's sort of the attitude that I've exuded in at school. And I wonder, you guys back then, right, being freshmen, sophomores, you know, and your whole life ahead of you, not even thinking about children. Did that ever cross your mind? Like, oh, there's Fran and she's a mom and she's, you know, doing all these things. And did that cross your mind at all? Or what was your impression and things like that? And did that affect you in any way at that time?
That's a really good question, because I forgot about that dynamic. Like I forgot about you pumping and all of that, which I think speaks to the fact that for me, it was like, oh, this is just a thing. Like I never really thought about it too much, but it's kind of interesting. It's something that I think about a lot, like, and was thinking about a lot when I was breastfeeding. The whole idea of like, why is this a political act, but it feels that way all the time? Like, I feel like anytime I breastfed in public, I was always waiting for a fight. which was a weird, but in like a fierce mama warrior where I was like, let someone come at me. I will I will roll them out with my baby on one arm. Like, but it's so weird to think about it in terms of that. And like, I remember speaking to my father about the fact that breastfeeding was something that like was sort of a political thing, and I was telling him about like the nurse ins, I think is what they were called, like with and Starbucks and all that, and he was like, are you serious? People are weirded out by that. And my dad's like this, he's like in his 70s, he's like an old school kind of conservative Russian man. And he was just like, that's crazy. I can't believe people make a big deal out of it. So it is really, really funny and strange to think about like this culture where we have this huge kind of like cultural pushback of mothers who are now saying like, no, F you, I got to feed my kid. It doesn't matter where or when that is, that's a priority. But it's still very much like an issue. I mean, you are not the first woman, and unfortunately, nor will you be the last woman who has told me like, I had issues with this, and I had, you know, whether it was direct or implicit, I had pushback against this whole idea, you know, and yeah, I mean, like for me, it was something where I was like, oh, breastfeeding, okay, whatever, no big deal, just come back later. I don't know, Jessica, do you want to answer that?
I think it was such a norm for me because I was, you know, my mom was a single mom, and so I would always go to work with my mom. I was like everywhere with my mom, like everywhere. So I never, you know, that is more normal to me than the converse, you know, like it's like, where are y'all's kids? Y'all have kids? You're not at work with.
Like, where are they? What are they doing? Who are they with?
Where are they? Yeah, exactly. So I mean, but I will say it is refreshing to see that in so many that and things like it, you know, like there's an artist here, I think a couple of years ago, who did the mommy mobile, right? Or like Fran, you're one of your pieces with the breastfeeding stations, you know, like or even the room at the CMOA that is specifically for nursing and has the wallpaper that was designed by the artist that is all of the animals, all mammals also nursing their babies, you know, like, again, these things don't need to be really radical. They should be totally normalized, you know, but for whatever reason, they're so few and far between. And so, yeah, I've been at restaurants with Olga and she'd just be like,
my fits were everywhere.
like in the same as I would, you know, like having dinner at her house the same way, you know, and it's like it's not a thing, but we have to continue to not make it a thing.
Right. So, and that's actually a more important piece, is that, well, one is, why is it a thing? Shouldn't have to be a thing. And now that it is a thing, we should try to normalize it, which is kind of almost, you know, one foot forward, two steps back. But the other thing that I wanted to ask, and it's kind of related to breastfeeding, is that I see this connection between your artwork and breastfeeding in sort of that ephemeral sort of act, like you, Olga, when you were doing your painting with Vika. So you're doing these things together in tandem, and somebody asked, did you video it? Well, no, because it was that act. It was that process, that particular process where the art happened, that allowed you to share this tandem sort of creativity that produced this beautiful work. And I see a parallel to that, and actually most of the moments in motherhood, including nursing, where there's this beautiful sort of performative act of, whether it's we pick up our child and we toss them up to the air and they have this delight for like split second. It's a performative act, the way we talk to our children. And yet and it's ephemeral, and we don't get that in most, I think, artistic environments, you know, or museums or galleries and things like that. And in fact, in academia, and Amy, you can correct me about this, I think some of our artists had issues during grad school when they were making art about their children or caregiving?
Definitely. Hold on, I have a stampede going.
All right.
Silently run. Thanks.
This is what should be normal. This is what it is. These are our lives. These are our future, our
normally
future generation. Yeah.
Absolutely. Normally I'm down in the dungeon office, isolated. And I moved my computer up here this past week just because I've been helping with remote schooling and that type of thing. I just wanted to be more involved. And I also want the kids to, it's Anthropology and Motherhood. I want them to be part of, to enjoy the programming and the story time that I've built to them. But anyways, getting back to this, like, the general conversation about the radicalism or the taboo of feeding children, and that's all related to the uncomfortability that our society has with women's bodies, and the fact that especially I think breasts in particular, there's like these binary associations with them. Their sexualized anatomy, but then they're also functional, right? And they give life and they nourish. And that's a big theme with the show, is this idea of nourishment and the sort of all the dimensions of that, whether it's navigating food allergies or coming up with formula before there was industrial formula, when a mother was incapacitated in a hospital and the father had to feed and nourish and grow their children. And just as like an anecdote, I had similar relationship as Fran did with breastfeeding and kids. With my first one, I was in grad school, so and we lived in like this really isolated beach town in the panhandle of Florida. So I took the whole year off, and I just basically breastfed like the whole year in isolation. And then with my second, I was newly in charge of an art museum, and then also promoted within that over a bunch of museums. And I had like a gazillion signs on the door, like when it would be breastfeeding time or pumping time. And I remember I would think I was so special, oh, I'm totally multitasking. I'm calling my educator and we're going to have a conversation while I'm pumping. And she'd be like, I can totally hear the pump. Like, I know you're pumping right now. Like, I just was like, oh yeah, like, I just have time right now. But I also kind of went through that phase where it was, especially with my first, where it's just like, this is dumb. Why is there so much taboo around this? And, thinking about the empowerment and being proud about, wearing my badge as a mother, but then having to experience what it was like to navigate the workplace. And also even like with Carlow, I know that there was like some policies where like they didn't want you bringing your children on campus, but it was like, it's a women-centric, founded by nuns university, but it was all tied around liability. So that was actually a bone of contention that faculty really kind of pushed back against. And again, it was because of like this fear of gonna get, sued because a kid gets hurt or something like that. But it kind of goes against the whole mission of Carlow. And I just like completely lost my train. So anyways, so in terms of some of the other artists in the show, both more than one talked about having children during grad school and making work about that experience. And part of that was kind of the way that Olga and Christen and Jessica explained their art making during this time. It was associated almost like developmentally, like it was responsive to the moment you were as a caregiver, as a mother, and the moment that your child is in developmentally, and how that shifted and how your time changed and what you were able to create changed. Sorry, they're getting in trouble.
It's okay. That it's.
But anyway, so the other artists in the show were making this type of work, and their professors were very dismissive of it. They said, that's fine, you can make this work for right now, but don't expect this to be a practice, like a prolonged practice. And one of the artists even said that she was surprised even with like professors that had children that would come in and be like, I don't have any, I'm not responsive to this work. And, the fact that this was not just an isolated kind of anecdote, but something that was experienced. And I think that speaks a lot, not only with the professional world and how hostile it is, but specifically the art professional world and the institutions of art and how restrictive they are. So should I throw out a question and then I'll mute so that you don't have to hear?
Well, I wanted to ask the audience. So we are at 5:50, and Jessica and Olga have a performance to do. So I just want to open
sorry
up.
if I may interrupt. Jessica and I were talking about just skipping that because it was just going to be like story time. So we can definitely spend more time having this conversation. We were talking about it privately. Yeah.
Well, we'll see. Let's see if the time takes us to the end. I'm wondering if anybody has any questions. I want to open up to the floor. For anyone, feel free to just use your mic, unmute your mic, or type in the chat if you don't want to unmute yourselves. Do we have any questions for the artists?
To Amy, do you mind, Fran, if I respond to what Amy was saying?
No, not at all, please.
Amy, I think your point didn't fall on deaf ears about the art world not respecting moms who function as artists. And I think, the ecosystem of art has many facets, and one of them to support artists is residency programs, which we know, right, create opportunities for learning and development. And that's really, Alicia speaks so eloquently and tells this narrative about how she was planning on going to a residency. She had these babies lined up, like her whole calendar. And then as soon as she let them know that she was pregnant, they're like, oh, we assume you're not coming. It's just the assumption that, and it's not even about a lack of space, because, you usually get your whole, you get your whole setup, right? It's just like an excuse. And there's never really a reason why. They use this line of liability, right? But I'm going to be there. I could fall down the stairs, like it's make believe. And so I think a lot of the onus falls on us to try to create our own systems that support us and care for us in the ways that we're not being supported and cared for within the greater arts ecosystem. And so I heard your point, and I just wanted to make sure to touch on that before we wrapped up.
I think that's
you guys make me so proud.
If I can respond to Jessica's response, just very quickly, I was thinking about as Amy was talking about her very valid, strong point about the art world being hostile to mothers, how very recently it is that we as women have been allowed to be in that world, and definitely women of color as well would be even later than that, like in the mainstream. For us to be accepted, it's such a short time span in the history of Western museum style art. So in a lot of ways, we're very much, not to put too fine a point on it, in the infancy of fighting for all of these things and fighting for that inclusion and that equal footing.
Well, and I want to also parse apart a couple of these, suppressions, which is that not only are women and caregivers structurally not able, it's structurally hostile in terms of figuring out, when, caregiving for your children and that type of thing. But then in terms of content that's being represented in the art itself, is also oppressed basically and kept out. So it's really mind-boggling if you think about it, how comprehensive that suppression is.
So I want to read something. I don't know if anyone here has visited the website, the Anthropology of Motherhood website, anthropologyofmotherhood.com, and our flyer where Amy and I write this statement about why this show is and why it's so radical and important at this point. And one of the lines in the, I can find it, good Lord. Okay, so when I first wrote this essay, I quoted Anne Marie Slaughter. She's the president of the New America Foundation. And she says, that human beings cannot survive alone. I mean, this is very, ubiquitous anthropological stuff here. Therefore, we must care for one another. Slaughter calls for us to refocus our pursuit of happiness from competition and financial success to a social infrastructure that gives equal importance to competition and caregiving. So I want to point that out. We're talking about all of these sort of hostility towards women and the concept of caregiving and and letting us into these big businesses, whatever it is, the art business, the gallery business, the academic business, and things like that. In general, we are in a very competitive environment within and outside of the art ecosystem. And I think that's a general attitude that most of us, most businesses really, if we want to be specific, and government focus on, is that competition of being, being so much better, so much richer, acquiring more things. And this is the value system that we've grown up to have, and that the United States has evolved in. So really, Anthropology of Motherhood is a call out to sort of recognize that this is where we are, and calling a shift to that. Let's shift our focus, and just instead of competing with each other and trying to be more financially sound than each other, let's take care of each other. Let's look out for each other. And so the way that you guys are explaining all of these points comes down to, why is it that people don't see the world the way mothers can? The mothers would see their world in the microcosm, the way mothers take care of their families. That is not the macro. And it is very obvious right now during the pandemic that a lot of these caregiving skills, these caregiving attitudes, this system is not working. So I just wanted to throw that out there.
Yeah, Fran, we got to start caring for each other.
Yeah, sure, for sure.
Well, and I want to point out too is we had Melissa Shaganoff, who is an Indigenous artist and activist from Alaska, come and do a workshop on land acknowledgement. And a big part of this, that as I've worked on this with Fran and have worked on other kind of research projects parallel to it, that looks at it in terms of the culture of care as something that's antithetical to Western capitalist Eurocentric values and the way society is structured, that Melissa really talked about Indigenous culture and talked about ideas of visiting culture in her community, that to take time and visit with elders at their houses and spend time and slow that time down. I think it's fundamentally a cultural difference, and I think that this tension between the micro and the macro is a result of the residues of colonialism, the way in which capitalism is structured purely, it's based on competition. It's based on zero sum, acquisition of resources. So the other thing that Melissa talked about was gift giving culture, that you circulate the gifts and it creates a network of relationships. It's relational, and that's how you build strength politically and socially and culturally in her culture with the tribes. We don't have that. We have acquisition culture, right? We don't circulate the gifts, we acquire. So I think these are all and that's what I love about the show, and the idea that what Fran brought to me is this idea of just expanding, using motherhood as a very accessible jumping off point to expand into these much larger questions regarding this. And I just wanted to say just some remarks on after listening to Olga and Christen and Jessica talk, but there's there's such an emphasis, I think, in storytelling. There's an emphasis that I think amongst all of your work in terms of mark making that I think is really interesting. I wanted, Jessica, really enjoyed the example of the digital drawings that you did with your daughter. I think just in terms of mommy culture, if you will, and the contested space of the screen and screen time, how you, because it's true, like those phones are designed to like tap into our like, you know, intuitive, you know, whatever subconscious nervous system, and it's just like physically addictive for us. So it's obviously going to be physically addictive for children, but how you know, turn that around, pivoted that into this creative space and into utilizing it as a tool again for mark making and looking at documenting process, I thought was really interesting. And also the way in which that you translated that into space, and then with the soft sculpture and thinking about accessibility and taking space, I thought that was really interesting. But again, I just think it's, you know, I really enjoyed your presentations. I love your works and your work in the gallery. And hopefully in January, we'll be able to bring the artists and our families into the space, and limited visitors. But right now, with the current conditions, we're not. So we're going to try our best to, you know, create at least some more virtual experiences. But this idea of like tandem creativity, and the shifting of time and the sense of time, I think that's another theme in the show. There's a video called Obsession, and the artist, the way it's about breastfeeding, and it's about like the early years of the artist's daughter, but the way in which the editing speeds up and slows down in terms of the montage, and slows down at the point where she's like zooms in for like the act of breastfeeding and the intimacy of it. I think it really reflects the way in which time is so malleable and flexible, and how absolutely fast it is, but how much it slows down. And that's, I think, reflected, again, Jessica, and how you adapted the work, and also what Christen and Olga were saying. And then the idea too of this like intergenerationality aspect, I think that kind of permeates the whole thing, your whole project. So I just wanted to like throw out those comments based on, you know, I'm the privileged one that gets to go into the space all the time. Like, this is a great show. Too bad nobody can actually join me in here. But anyway, so it was really great to hear your commentary on it. And I just wanted to kind of throw out those reflections.
I want to open the floor. It's already 6 o'clock, ladies, people. Sorry if we kind of took over the airtime, but if there are any participants here who would like to ask a question now for the artist, or for me and Amy, or to each other, please feel free to unmute yourselves. We'll give ourselves another 5 minutes to do that. I just want to acknowledge, oh, Sarika, are you coming?
Yeah, I actually wanted to make a comment, and I'm like so impressed with how Olga and Jessica were talking about motherhood. For me, the experience was very different. After I graduated from CMU, I was pregnant in 2007, and I had a show at the Mattress Factory Museum, and I remember leaving my daughter at home and installing there for the whole day. I left the house at 9, told my mom I'll be back in 2 hours, did not come back till 10 at night. And I was covered in red chili pepper when I came back. And my mother was like, you left the kid. Like, she was being like, I had pumped enough for her to be fed, but I just like was on a different zone. So I could kind of relate to you talking about like how it's a bittersweet experience, because when you're working hard for your projects or staying up night, you make that choice. But when you have a baby, it's not a choice. You have to stay up and feed the child because you have to do it. Nobody else can. But I really thought like it's incredible how you kind of have like made your kids a part of your work. It's been very difficult for me because I'm too much of a control freak, but it's good to hear.
Thank you. Thank you for that.
So I'm just curious, are there any non-mothers or non-parents in the audience, and what they think about this?
Yeah, I know. I've got a lot of my, Sarah, and a
Oh,
lot
Sarah,
of my,
right.
a handful of my students are in this class. Students,
Yeah.
if you want to ask a question. So
I'm one of the students. My name is Raina, and I am only 21, and I don't have any kids. I'm still in school, and it's just really inspirational to see women and how powerful they are and how they can take this time and like they form a human being in their body. And then not only that, everything changes, your hormones change, your life changes completely, but to still be able to go and like incorporate it into like kind of intertwining like their new life and their old life to create a beautiful balance is so impressive. And it's not only impressive because like I love seeing all these powerful women, but it's a good reminder because like everything's really stressful and just like life is hard. And so things are changing. And even though you might be like from not having a kid to having a kid is so different, you can still find a new middle ground so you can keep your identity as a female, like as an individual, and kind of preserve it. Because I think a lot of times moms are so willing and so giving that they become the identity of only a mother. And that's great. I mean, it's not a bad thing, but it's hard for them. And it's kind of optimistic for me because it's like, okay, you don't have to worry about sacrificing totally. You can include your kids into what you do, and you can make those adjustments as like the one person mentioned before. It's like, you know, if you're type A, you can still make the accommodations, even though it seemed impossible before you had the kid, that it kind of like, I don't know, empowered you and you strengthened and you were able to do this. And I don't know, it just overall makes me feel empowered as a female, but also as an individual who is more type A.
Thank you for that. And I just wanted to quickly respond to you. And at least for me, because I am a very type A person, I just want to, my therapist is speaking through me right now. I want to dispel the myth that there is any sort of balance, because there isn't. Some days I'm an incredible artist and other days I'm an incredible mom, and I'm not both at the same exact time. And it's my practice, at least for me, I don't want to speak to anyone else's experience or Jessica's experience or anything like that, but at least for me, it is a constant struggle to try to maintain those two things, and it's a learning process, and it gets easier as Vika gets older, but it is still like very hard, like what Jessica was saying before about like kind of neglecting your own body and not eating. Every, you know, if I'm having a very productive day, every like 3 hours or so, I'm like, oh shit, did I feed my kid? Like, have I checked her diaper? Like, she's running around and she's playing and she's not screaming, but it is, it's definitely, it is this contention all the time with that, and the mom guilt is very real. And just want to throw out there real quick a PSA for everyone should be in therapy, because it is extremely important to have a professional remind you every week that you're not fucking up as much as you think you are. That said, I find your comments very valuable and very important, because it is important, as Jessica was saying and as Fran was saying, for us to take care of each other and support each other, whether we're moms or not, or whether we're planning to be moms eventually.
Yeah. On that note, thank you, Olga. I just want to say thank you to Jessica and Olga, and to Sarah, of course, our digital content curator, Amy, for being here and putting this together. Thank you, Jessica and Olga. This was a wonderful talk, and we know you have to go. You guys have busy lives. So I just want to remind everyone that this session was recorded. I will be sending the recording out to the people who participated in the session so we can review it and you know, go back for any information that you need. Again, the website for the show is www.anthropologyofmotherhood.com. Please visit it and look at the wonderful work that Jessica, Olga, and Christen have there. Thank you, Christen, for being with us.
Thank you, Fran. Thank you, Amy. I know I can speak on behalf of the entire Lioness Collective, where we are just so humbled and honored to be able to be in community with you all today. Thank you for creating this space for us. Fran, thank you for the legacy that you're building for mothers in our city and beyond. We are honored. Blessings. Thank you all.
Oh, and Fran, before you go, there were some folks who were interested in reading the whole master copy. May
Yes.
I email that to you so you can send it around for those who are interested? And also Kristen's poem. Kristen, I don't know if she's still on here. If she's not, I'll just grab her. But can I forward both of those things to you for those
Yes.
people who want to see that? Okay, thank you.
Absolutely.
All right, thank you so much.
Thank you. Good job, Olga. You did great.
Yeah, excellent job. Thank you so much, Olga, Jessica, and Kristen.
Thank
I'm
you.
so proud.
Mwah.
Thank you.
Thanks, everyone.